I had imagined the day differently. Not grand, not loud, just warm. A small garden party in the backyard I had kept blooming through every spring, the chairs I reupholstered myself, lined up beneath strings of lights I hung 2 days before, and a simple cake from the bakery that still remembered my usual. I didn't need the applause. I only wanted the acknowledgement. A nod, maybe, to the decades I had spent building something they now called theirs. My son, Daniel, had planned the gathering, or at least, that was the story they told. In truth, it was his wife, Amanda, who arranged everything. The white wine, the tent rental, the customized coasters with their initials printed in gold. It was meant to be a celebration for my retirement. 42 years in public education, 27 of those as a principal. I thought I'd earned a moment. A thank you. Something. Amanda had picked out the music. Light jazz, piped in just low enough to drown the birds. The guest list leaned more toward her co-workers than mine. A few of Daniel's friends, none of whom I'd seen since his wedding. I recognized the neighbor from across the street, but not the people filling my kitchen, touching the fridge I had bought, stacking dishes on countertops I had scrubbed for decades. Still, I smiled. I poured drinks. I passed hors d'oeuvres. Amanda didn't season quite right. I made polite conversation with a woman who mistook me for a caterer. I didn't correct her. When Daniel stood to give a toast, I paused by the sliding door, wiping my hands on the apron Amanda had suggested I wear, just to keep things tidy. The glass in his hand was already half empty. His tie was loose. I thought he might thank me. Just a few words, a story from his childhood. Something. Instead, he raised his glass and turned to Amanda. "None of this," he said. "None of what we've built would be possible without this incredible woman." Everyone clapped. Amanda beamed. He went on, how she helped him believe in himself, how she supported him through career changes, how she made this house a home. This house. He never said my name, not once. I didn't flinch. I didn't make a sound. I waited for someone else to speak up, to mention that I had signed the loan papers, that the mortgage had been in my name alone for years, that Daniel and Amanda had only moved in after their apartment flooded and never quite moved out. No one said anything. I took the empty wine bottles from the table and carried them to the recycling bin. My hands were steady. I had trained myself long ago not to show hurt where others could twist it. Later that evening, after the guests had left and Amanda was in the kitchen complaining about the stain on her dress, Daniel came to me in the hallway. He rested his arm against the wall and smiled in that tired way of his. "We've been thinking," he said. "Now that you're retired, maybe it's time for a change. Something smaller, easier to manage. You could finally travel. You always said you wanted to." I looked past him at the staircase I had climbed every night since we moved in. I thought of the corner by the window where I kept my books, the garden hose coiled like muscle memory near the porch, the drawer in the hallway still filled with birthday cards from when Daniel was 6. He waited for me to speak. I didn't. Amanda called out from the kitchen, "Mom, we can help you find a place. There's this lovely senior condo near the park, has a pool and everything." She called me Mom then. That was the word she used, but her voice held none of the weight it should have. Just air and pretense. I didn't answer. I just walked past them, up the stairs, into the bedroom I hadn't repainted in over 15 years. I closed the door quietly. Then I sat on the edge of the bed, and I listened to the silence settle over my own house like I was already gone. I didn't sleep that night, but I didn't cry either. I lay in the dark with the familiar weight of the ceiling pressing down, tracing shadows as they moved across the walls like they were trying to escape before morning. The house was quiet in a way it hadn't been in years. Not peaceful, just paused. As if it, too, was waiting for my next move. At 5:30, I folded the quilt at the foot of the bed. The one I had sewn back in 1994 during the winter, Daniel caught the flu and needed warm layers. I placed it gently into the worn brown suitcase that had traveled with me to 3 cities, 2 weddings, and 1 funeral. Then came the photo of my late husband, Harold. The frame was scratched on the back, where I once dropped it during a move, but the glass held. I wrapped it in one of my cardigans and laid it on top of the quilt. The closet was already half empty. Over the past few months, Amanda had suggested we streamline the space, clearing out what she called clutter. I had let her, one hanger at a time. Now there wasn't much left to take. A few blouses, my church shoes, and a paperback novel I never finished. I slid them in carefully. I didn't rush. There's a kind of dignity in moving slowly, in not looking like you're fleeing, even when that's exactly what you're doing. I saved the red folder for last. It had sat untouched beneath the lining of my suitcase for years, its corners soft from age, but the contents intact. Inside was the original deed to the house, signed in blue ink, my name printed clearly above Daniel's, a gift I had once framed as shared investment, something to secure his future, something to honor Harold's memory. I carried that folder like it was bone, like it could break if I held it wrong. At 6:30, I zipped the suitcase shut. The sound cut through the stillness like an admission. I looked around the room. The walls were bare. The air smelled faintly of citrus cleaner, Amanda's choice. I left the bed made, pillows fluffed, blinds half open just the way I liked. Then I walked downstairs, the suitcase wheels silent on the carpeted steps. Daniel was asleep on the couch, arm draped over his eyes. Amanda's shoes were by the door, heels tipped to one side, careless. I didn't leave a note. I didn't touch the light switch. I opened the front door, stepped outside, and pulled it closed behind me without a sound. There's a way to disappear without ever running. The taxi was already waiting. I had booked it the night before, sometime between their suggestion about senior condos and Amanda's final comment about how fresh starts can be good for everyone. The driver didn't ask questions, just loaded my bag and confirmed the address. As the car pulled away, I didn't turn to look back. I didn't need to. I had memorized every angle of that porch, every creak of that step near the bottom, every crack in the sidewalk I once filled with chalk for Daniel when he was a boy. None of it belonged to me anymore. Not because I gave it up, but because they made it clear I was only ever borrowing space. The sun had just begun to rise when we reached the extended stay motel. Brick exterior, faded sign, lobby that smelled of coffee and faint mildew. I handed over cash, declined housekeeping, and took the key without words. The room was small, dim, with a view of the parking lot and a dented mini-fridge humming like it had secrets. But the lock worked. The silence was mine. And for the first time in weeks, I felt like I had stepped into something that was mine alone. I placed the red folder in the motel nightstand drawer. Then I sat on the edge of the bed, back straight, hands folded, eyes dry. There would be no begging, no confrontation, no pleas to understand. What had been given could be taken back. And what they thought they owned. They hadn't read the fine print closely enough. The folder wasn't locked, but it felt heavier than anything else I'd carried out of that house. I placed it on the motel's small desk, flattened the bent corners, and opened it like I was turning a page from a life I no longer lived. Inside, the deed sat on top, still crisp, still legible, still mine. I stared at the name on the first line. Marjorie Kane. No Daniel. No Amanda. No joint tenants. Just me, signed 18 years ago, recorded by the county and untouched since. I remembered that office visit clearly, even now. The lawyer's pen had a chipped gold cap. The receptionist had offered tissues before I even sat down. Harold had been gone 3 weeks, and I was still wearing the same black dress. I bought that house with life insurance money. Not as a new beginning, but as an anchor. Daniel was in his final year of college, and I thought giving him somewhere permanent might keep him close. He moved in without fanfare. Amanda followed. It wasn't a formal arrangement, just, for a while, they said. Then their lease ended. Then she was pregnant. Then she wasn't. They never moved out. What they called our house was always mine. I just stopped reminding them. Over the years, I paid every property tax bill, every insurance renewal, every emergency repair. They contributed here and there, new curtains once, a television I didn't need. But the structure, the soil, the signature were all mine. Still, Amanda began claiming space. First the office, then the garage, then the kitchen walls, where she hung prints that didn't match the tile. She painted over Harold's study without asking. It felt too dark, she said. I let it happen. At first, because I wanted peace. Then because I didn't want to sound bitter. Then, finally, because I wasn't sure they'd listen anyway. But the papers never changed. I found every receipt tucked neatly in that folder. Evidence of maintenance, refinancing, and quiet endurance. The account numbers matched the ones on my checkbook. I ran my fingers down each line like reading Braille. Every payment said the same thing. I was still here. I had always been here. I called Cynthia Boyle the next morning. We hadn't spoken in years, but she answered like no time had passed. I asked for copies of the county's most recent title record and transfer log. No rush, I said. She sent them within the hour. No changes, no amendments, no surprise filings. Nothing had been added to the deed. Not even Daniel's name. That afternoon, I walked 3 blocks to a notary's office beside a laundromat. I signed a fresh affirmation of ownership, had it certified in triplicate, and walked out with 3 stamped documents folded neatly in my purse. One copy went back in the red folder. One stayed with me, and the third I placed inside the room's little safe beneath my wallet and a half-used bottle of hand lotion. I didn't feel triumphant, just awake. They had moved into my house. They had decorated it, filled it with noise, invited guests, toasted in my kitchen, laughed under my roof. But they never saw the name etched into the foundation. They never asked if it was still mine. Because somewhere along the way, they decided it no longer mattered. But I hadn't signed it over, and I wasn't going to start now. The motel didn't have much to offer, but it had Wi-Fi. Slow, inconsistent, and shared between too many rooms, but it worked. I hadn't checked my phone since leaving the house. I hadn't wanted to. But that morning, I pulled out my old tablet, charged it by the bed, and logged in with hands that hadn't shaken until then. Daniel hadn't messaged. Amanda hadn't called. I hadn't expected them to. They probably thought I was staying with a friend, or in some facility, somewhere convenient, somewhere quiet. That suited them. They never did ask where I went, just that I go. I opened Facebook, not out of habit, but instinct. Amanda was never one to keep things to herself. She curated her life like a storefront, filtered, staged, and captioned for applause. It took seconds to find it. A new post. A panoramic shot of the backyard from the night of the retirement party. String lights glowing, people laughing. Amanda in the foreground, holding a glass of wine like she'd won something. Grateful for all the support as we start this next chapter, she wrote. Home is where you build it with the people you love. It had 38 likes and one comment from a coworker. You guys deserve all of it. House is stunning. No mention of me, no thanks. No hint of who built that house or who paid the first down payment when Daniel's loan fell through. I scrolled further. Last week, a reel of Amanda unboxing kitchen gadgets. The caption read, "Making our space feel more like us." 3 weeks ago, a selfie in the living room I furnished, the sofa I chose, the rug I cleaned every spring. Finally home, the caption read. They'd written me out like I was a prologue no one needed. I kept scrolling past the curated joy until I found what I hadn't realized I was looking for. A post from Daniel's college friend, Derek, tagging Daniel in a comment. It was short. Just, "You ever pay me back from that real estate thing?" I clicked through. It wasn't the only one. 2 others. One from a name I didn't recognize. Still waiting on our end of the agreement. You promised the house as collateral. And another, even older, is your mom really okay with that lien? Lien. My breath caught. I clicked out and opened my banking app. The password still worked. The last mortgage payment had gone out the week prior. The amount was higher than it should have been. I checked the statements. 3 new charges in the last quarter, fees I didn't authorize. I recognized the institution's name, not the bank I refinanced with. Something private. Predatory. I sat back and stared at the ceiling. Daniel had leveraged something that wasn't his. Or worse, Amanda had. My signature hadn't changed, but someone had used my name, or assumed I wouldn't look, or counted on the fact that I no longer had the energy to care. I poured myself motel-brewed coffee in a paper cup, watched the cream curl in on itself, and opened a spreadsheet. I listed every payment I could remember, every tax bill, every fee. I started rebuilding the timeline of what I had paid for, what they had claimed, and where the cracks had begun. Amanda had built an online persona around stability, domestic bliss, entrepreneurial success. But the truth was already leaking out in the comments she hadn't bothered to delete. They had built their life like a photo wall, beautiful, symmetrical, and attached with cheap adhesive. One good tug and it would collapse. I didn't write anything. I didn't comment. I just saved screenshots, dates, tags, mentions. I made a folder titled Truth. I didn't need to say a word. They were unraveling, frame by frame, in full view of the audience they had performed for. And all I had to do was watch. I hadn't looked at the paperwork in years. Some of it was buried in banker's boxes I hadn't opened since Harold passed. Some sat untouched in folders with bent corners and faded labels. But I remembered the numbers. Not exactly, but close enough. Close enough to know something wasn't right. The mortgage payment Amanda had promised to cover after I refinanced to help them with their business had risen. Subtly, then sharply. I thought it was a mistake at first, but the statement said otherwise. Service fees, interest accrual, principal adjustment, the kind of financial noise designed to slip past someone tired, someone trusting. But I wasn't tired anymore. I called a bank listed on the statement. Not the original lender. A different name. A private financial firm I'd never worked with. The voice on the other end was polite, scripted. She asked for my verification. I gave it. Then I asked the question I already knew the answer to. When was this loan originated? She hesitated. 16 months ago. Who signed for it? There was a pause, then Marjorie Kane and Daniel Kane. My stomach didn't turn. My hands didn't shake. I asked her to email me the documentation. She said she would. And she did. Within the hour, I had a PDF open on my tablet, a scanned signature line, my name, in handwriting that looked close but not close enough. It was mine only if you squinted. Only if you believed I would sign a second mortgage against the home I had nearly paid off for a catering business Amanda claimed to be building from the ground up. Except this loan hadn't funded any catering equipment. It hadn't bought tables or trucks or anything useful. A quick search of the transfer records showed the money had gone into a personal checking account, one registered to Daniel, ending in 4,772. The same account he used for fantasy football leagues and online sports bets. It wasn't business. It wasn't emergency. It was theft. Slow, familial, and wrapped in the language of love. I opened the shoebox of old documents I had brought from the house. There it was, a notarized agreement from 2016 where I had co-signed a loan to help Daniel pay off a medical bill Amanda hadn't disclosed. That time I had agreed. That time it had been real. This time, I hadn't even been told. And yet they had counted on my name, on the residue of trust, on the silence I had cultivated like a habit. That night, I called Cynthia again. I told her I needed a property history pull. Everything filed on the address for the last 5 years. She didn't ask why. She knew better than to push when a quiet woman starts asking real questions. The next morning, an envelope slid under my motel door. Inside were copies of 3 filings, a lien from a private lender, a secondary loan filing, and a power of attorney Daniel had attempted to file but hadn't finalized. It had been rejected for incomplete verification. He had tried to gain control. Tried to go further. I folded each document carefully and placed them in the red folder. Then, I labeled a new section. Unauthorized. I didn't need to storm into their kitchen with accusations. I didn't need confrontation. What I had now was better. Proof. Quiet, legal, dated. Enough to freeze a bank account, trigger an audit, dissolve the illusion they had painted online. They thought I would forget, that age was erosion, that silence meant confusion, that the woman they escorted out the door was no longer watching. But I remembered. I always had. And now I had the paper trail. The first crack I didn't cause arrived in the form of a voicemail. The motel's landline blinked red one afternoon. I hadn't given the number to anyone except Cynthia and Aaron, the lawyer a friend referred me to when I first left. But the receptionist said someone called asking for Mrs. Kane and left a message, sounding confused. Curious, I played it back. Hi, this is Tony from Monarch Bistro. We're still waiting on the final payment for your private party. We usually don't reach out this way, but your son gave us this number as a backup contact. If there's been a mix-up, just let us know. I stood there, staring at the phone as the beep ended the call. Monarch Bistro. I remembered the name. Amanda had tagged it on a photo from a week prior, her and Daniel at a long, candlelit table, laughing with a group of acquaintances, captioned, "Celebrating success with the best team." I had saved the post without much thought. But now I looked closer. No plates, just drinks. A paper menu propped for display, like the meal hadn't actually been served. I called the restaurant myself. Tony answered. I gave no details, just said I had questions about an event. He remembered instantly. They said it was a launch dinner, rented our private room, custom menus, champagne request. Said the tab was covered by a business fund, then gave a card that declined. When was this? 4 days ago. Said they'd fix it. Still haven't. I thanked him, hung up, and stared at the wall for a long moment. Amanda had been building something online. Posts about her consulting business, client meetings, luxury lifestyle. But if the restaurant was real and the money wasn't, the cracks were more than personal, they were public. I checked her social media again. 3 posts had been deleted since that morning. A photo from the dinner was gone. So was the caption photo of a new espresso machine, one I suspected had never actually arrived. Comments remained. People asking questions, offering congratulations, then confusion. Wait, I thought this was sponsored? Didn't you say it was booked through your agency? Amanda hadn't replied. I watched in real time as their story loosened its grip. Meanwhile, Aaron, my quiet legal partner in all this, had finished preparing a summary of my documentation. No charges filed yet. But a notice of inquiry had been sent to the lending agency that held the most recent mortgage activity. Just a letter. No accusations. Just scrutiny. Enough to make them pause. That night, I took out the receipt from Monarch Bistro. I had asked Tony to email me a copy, just for reference. It was printed on thick ivory stock. Posted by Amanda Kane. Below it, backup billing contact, M. Kane. There it was. Again, my name. Even after I left, they still used me to hold their lives together. Still leaned on the idea of me, the placeholder mother, the invisible safety net. They toasted champagne they couldn't afford in a restaurant they couldn't pay for, counting on the fact that no one would ask questions if the last name on the invoice sounded familiar enough. But the name had come back to me. The paper said so. The lawyer said so. The law would too. The next morning, I printed out the receipt, the social post, and the unanswered comment thread. I added them to the red folder under a new tab, Exposure. The more they performed for an audience, the more evidence they left behind. All I had to do was watch the applause turn into silence. They thought the show could go on. They didn't realize the curtains were already burning. It arrived on a Tuesday. Not with police, not with shouting, not with any ceremony at all. Just a folded notice slipped between the handles of the front gate Daniel used to forget to lock. Amanda found it first, according to the digital trail. She posted about it an hour later on her personal account, the one she thought I didn't know about. Landlords can be so heartless, she wrote, the photo carefully staged with her holding the notice, lips pursed, painted nails just visible. Some of us are just trying to build a life. She didn't name me. She didn't have to. I sat in the motel room, sipping coffee gone lukewarm, and stared at her caption. Not because it stung, but because it was surreal. I was the heartless landlord now, the villain in their retelling. The one who had apparently disrupted their perfect little life by enforcing what had always been true. I hadn't needed lawyers to force them out. I didn't press charges. I didn't even speak to them. All it took was a verification of title, a formal notification of unauthorized occupancy, and a request, submitted by Aaron on my behalf, to reclaim the property. No courtroom, no shouting match. Just signatures, a seal, and the weight of paper doing what decades of kindness never managed. The bank didn't push back. Once the fabricated second loan and power of attorney attempt were flagged, they backed away fast. Amanda's lender, the one tied to the bistro charges and the false business filings, withdrew support almost immediately. Their credit line evaporated. The utilities, transferred quietly back into my name, were set to disconnect in 10 days. And still, Amanda posted, we're being displaced. People are so quick to turn on you when you're trying your best. Below the post, sympathetic comments flowed in. Old friends, strangers. a cousin I hadn't seen since Harold's funeral, all of them offering support, spare rooms, even donations. They didn't know. How could they? To them, Amanda was struggling. Daniel was a victim, and I, silent, unseen, was just a name on a document. I watched the scene unfold like theater. No curtain, no applause. Daniel, to his credit, didn't post anything. He stopped appearing online altogether. No likes, no shares, no comments. I imagined the quiet inside that house, boxes appearing, tension mounting, the truth creeping in around the corners. They hadn't just lost the house, they had lost the illusion that it was ever theirs to begin with. The eviction wasn't contested. They didn't file a claim. They didn't ask for more time. Maybe they knew it would only dig the hole deeper. Maybe Daniel had finally read the papers, the real ones, with my signature, with my full name, with dates going back further than Amanda's marriage vows. 4 days later, a moving truck appeared. One of the neighbors recorded it, posted it in the local group. "End of an era," someone wrote. Another replied, "Didn't they just renovate that kitchen?" No one asked where I had gone. No one knew I was watching. I didn't celebrate. I didn't feel lighter. If anything, I felt the weight of how long I had allowed things to drift. Years of swallowing comments, of stepping aside in my own home, of believing that silence was safety. But the house was empty now. The front door no longer had their wreath. The driveway was clear. The mailbox had my name again. And for the first time in years, they couldn't ignore it. It took 3 days after the moving truck pulled away for Amanda's feed to go dark. Not all at once. Not in some dramatic sweep. Just slowly. A caption edited here. A photo quietly removed. Replies disabled on older posts. By the end of the week, the grid had thinned out like wilted petals. Nothing bloomed there anymore. I noticed the change not because I was looking for it, but because I had made it a ritual. Each morning after coffee, I checked in, not out of cruelty, but clarity. Watching the story unravel wasn't revenge, it was confirmation. That truth, no matter how long it waits, always finds its shape again. Her last visible post was a quote in cursive on a beige background. "Growth often begins in the dark." I suppose that was meant to inspire. Or maybe to distract. There were no comments. Daniel never returned to social media. His profile remained a silent frame. Last update from the night of my retirement party. Smiling in a photo I hadn't been invited to pose for. I stared at his face longer than I should have. Not because I missed him, but because I couldn't find the version of him I once knew in those pixels. He looked like someone pretending to be the kind of man who had a mother. The silence on Amanda's feed echoed louder than any accusation. She had built a life online. Structured, aspirational, filtered. She was always arranging the table just so, adjusting lighting for photos of their brunches, curating gratitude posts for minor purchases like she'd just returned from a victory. Now there were gaps. Empty tiles where images once held up a story. I checked the tags from other accounts. One friend had posted a blurry photo of Amanda in a borrowed blazer at a local networking event. "You look amazing," someone commented. Amanda didn't respond. Another tag, this time from someone I didn't know. The caption read, "Crazy how fast people disappear when the money dries up." No one had untagged her yet. I collected these pieces, not for proof, not for records, but to understand how quickly a persona can collapse when it no longer serves an audience. Amanda had treated life like a campaign, and like any brand built on borrowed time and borrowed credit, it had expired the moment reality came due. What struck me wasn't the vanishing, it was the quiet. There was no apology post, no explanation, no pivot to vulnerability or lesson sharing. She didn't try to reclaim the narrative, she just let it go. Like the house. Like the marriage, if I had to guess. The last tag from Daniel's account, weeks old now, was gone. Unlinked. His name no longer appeared in her captions. He had vanished from her story the same way I once had from theirs, and in that reversal, there was something like closure. I didn't smile, I didn't gloat. I simply closed the app, turned off the screen, and let the silence rest. Later that evening, Aaron called. He had received word from one of the financial institutions involved. Amanda's accounts were frozen pending review. The lender had submitted documentation of irregularities tied to the address. Nothing criminal yet, but the walls were folding inward. Quietly, legally. I thanked him and asked him to forward a copy to my file. I opened the folder again, not to add anything this time, but to review it. Every tab: deed, loans, fraud, exposure. And now silence. Each section labeled, dated, clean. I wasn't building a case anymore. I was maintaining a record, something I could hold in my hands if memory ever softened. Amanda once said in passing, "The internet never forgets." But it does, and fast. What it remembers, what it preserves, isn't always what you wanted it to keep. And what it erases, sometimes, is the story you worked the hardest to sell. The house sat empty for nearly 6 weeks. The lawn grew wild again, taller than Amanda would have allowed, patches of clover pushing through the walkways she once power-washed for likes. The mail stopped. The shutters curled slightly at the corners, old paint giving in to summer heat. I didn't return to it. I didn't need to. Some places die a little when the noise leaves. That one had already done its part. Instead, I signed the final papers remotely. Aaron had found a buyer, an older couple from upstate, looking for something stable, move-in ready, without complications. I accepted their offer. I didn't counter. I didn't visit the closing. The funds went directly to a new account in a new bank, under a name only I used now. I had no plans for it yet. But it felt clean, like folded linen after rain. I moved to a town without a target. One of those places that doesn't care where you came from, only that you pay your rent and don't block anyone's driveway. The landlord handed me keys without fanfare. The windows faced east. Morning light arrived early and honest. There was a patch of soil behind the unit, just big enough for tomatoes if I was careful. I hadn't gardened since Harold passed. But my hands remembered. I planted things slowly. Cherry tomatoes, basil, lavender, no fence, just space. No one here knew my story. No one asked. They only waved when they passed. The grocer called me ma'am. The librarian noticed I read slowly and never rushed my returns. The quiet didn't press in anymore. It expanded. One afternoon, I bought a notebook. The same kind I used when I was still teaching, spiral-bound, lined, heavy with empty pages. On the first page, I wrote only this: "You left with everything." I stayed with myself. That was all. I didn't send it. I didn't need to. I wrote it for the version of me that once believed in being tolerated, in staying small, in earning space by being useful. She was gone now, or maybe just sleeping somewhere safe. The phone buzzed once, weeks later. "Daniel, please call me. Just talk to me." Then again, 10 minutes after. "I know things got bad, but you're still my mom." I let the screen go black. Not out of anger, not punishment, just stillness. Some bridges don't collapse in fire. They crumble, quietly, over time, stone by stone, memory by memory, Until one day you realize you're standing on the edge of a river and the other side is too far to want to reach. So you plant a garden and you stop waiting for footsteps.